Thank you everyone for joining me today for Edutainment Learning, educating with expert primary sources through video conferencing technology. And today, well, my name is Ralph Krauss. I'm with Academica Virtual Education, and I work closely with Academica, fine folks there who are very forward-thinking individuals. And I'm excited to share some of the great stuff that we've been able to do. This was before COVID, long before COVID, during COVID as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and begin. And if you have any questions, go ahead and message them in the chat. And we'll have time for those questions towards the end. I'm going to be sharing a lot of videos with you guys. So a little bit about myself. I work in digital innovations with Pinecrest Academy in Nevada and Academica Virtual Education. And I helped create an initiative called Edutainment Learning. I will just go over here. And so how this began was I was a classroom teacher, and I kind of came up with the questions: if I could connect my students with anyone living, who would it be? And it kind of dawned on me one day what was stopping me from reaching out. So, oh, got a message here. Okay, so I want you to think about, as an educator, who would you connect your students with? Anyone living, who would it be, and how would you tie it to instruction? And what's stopping you from reaching out? So, edutainment, what is it? Well, I define it as the process of entertaining and or inspiring people at the same time as you're teaching them something from a primary source through technology. This initiative is made possible through Academica Virtual Education and Academica and all of their partnering schools. So more or less how this works is that teachers would come to me and ask if I knew experts in various fields to connect their students to, and that way it would be a real live two-way interaction and discussion. I think there's a famous quote that says, "They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel." And that's more or less, you know, my central message with a lot of the guests that I've brought in front of our students. So these are all life experiences to connect students anywhere with the goal of educating and inspiring. There are 7.5 billion people on Earth, and I think that everyone has a lesson to teach. So I'm going to be sharing from the perspective of a student what these events kind of look like, sharing some of the more memorable events. So while you're watching these, don't think of it just as a teacher, think of it also from the perspective of a student. These are experts sharing their stories with students. Here we have Dolph Lundgren, who we know as an actor, but he was speaking to multiple students across a number of campuses, and he was speaking to them about his background, not only as an actor, but also his background in science. But in this particular video, he's talking to students about his creative process while acting.
Hi.
Hey.
You might have heard her say my name. It's Ashley.
Ashley, how are you? Hey.
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
I am an actor too, so obviously my question is going to be related to acting because we can smell each other a mile away. Let's be real.
Well spoken. What I do is I usually write down a backstory. If a lot of it isn't in the script, I have to find things that tend to inspire me. I look at every scene and I think about all the people in the scene, where they came from, how I've known them, how I feel about them, what time of the day it is, how I feel before I show up. And I try to not to rehearse the scene too much. Like, I know all the dialogue, but in movies, you try to be fresh. So when the camera is on you, you experience that thing, that moment for the
really well develop the character, and then I can just kind of become the character. So we basically do the same thing. That's really cool.
Yeah, good work and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Funny story about that girl is she's now a professional actress and actually is on a show on Hulu. So she actually went and pursued that career. So neat backstory. Here we have Grammy-winning musician Kenny Loggins speaking to students across the state of Nevada and Florida about his creative process.
What is the process of writing a song and making it?
Oh, well, that's a complicated question. For those of you who love music, you probably make up songs all the time, and you may not even know it. You're around the schoolyard, if you're running through playtime, and you might be humming something to yourself or singing out loud. So maybe sometimes it's something you heard on the radio, but maybe sometimes it's just something you're making up. Do any of you ever make up songs just for the fun of it?
Anybody can show of hands? Everyone in this room.
The way you do that is the same way I just sort of start singing whatever comes to my mind. And I've been taking guitar lessons, you know, so I know how to make a chord. A chord is like a whole bunch of notes. A chord can be as simple as 2 notes or the whole thing, but like that's a chord. I hear those in my head, so that when I make up a melody, you know, when I'm just walking around, sometimes I wake up in the morning with a melody in my head. Get ready to party. You're gonna be dancing till the dawn. They're gonna cut loose, from the dancing shoes. She's rocking the.
So these are fun, interactive lessons where they kind of come to life. And again, it's more than just a video. It's a two-way interaction between the expert guest speaker and the students. So here we have students that are learning about kind of redemption. These are students all over the world learning about persevering through adversity and bouncing back. This individual, his name is Frank Abagnale Jr. He's a security consultant known for his career as a con man, check forger, and imposter when he was 15 to 21 years old. And then he ultimately became an FBI agent. He's speaking to students all over the world in this footage.
I'm Frank Abagnale. It's a pleasure to be with all of you from all around the world, especially those of you over in Italy, which is my favorite place to be, one of my favorite countries. As many of you know me from the movie, Catch Me If You Can. I obviously ran away from home when I was 16 years old, ended up in the streets of New York, had to be resourceful to survive, so I impersonated an airline pilot for Pan Am for a couple of years. I was a doctor in a hospital for a while. I took the bar exams in Louisiana, passed the bar. I went on to write about $2.5 million in bad checks all around the world before I was old enough to drink at the age of 21. I was arrested when I was 21 by the French police. I served time in the French prisons. I was later extradited to Sweden. I served time in the Swedish prisons. And then I was returned to the United States, where a federal judge in America gave me 12 years in federal prison. I served 4 of those 12 years at a federal prison in Petersburg, Virginia. When I was 26 years old, the government offered to take me out of prison on the condition I go to work with an agency of the federal government for the remainder of my sentence or until my parole had been completed. I agreed to do that. I've been at the FBI now for 44 years. I'm still there, married to my one and only wife for 44 years. I have 3 sons, of one who is an FBI agent, celebrating 14 years in the Bureau himself. One son who develops video games. The last game he developed was Doom for his 25th anniversary. And I have a middle son and his wife own a chain of stores based out of Charleston. So my life has come completely full circle from the time I was 16. I just turned 72 in April.
See, and those are once, you know, and it goes back to that students will never forget how you made them feel. And we have the world at our fingertips with the internet and video conferencing. So here, this was a number of years ago. These were student broadcast journalism, or these were broadcast journalism students, and they were learning about being professional journalists. And this was a live Q&A session from NBC Dateline's Lester Holt. But what was amazing about this is that the students wanted him to participate in their student news program, and they actually got to direct Lester Holt in their student news program. So here's some of that footage. Here's them getting their lesson from live from Rockefeller Center from Lester Holt, and here is their collaboration.
And now we are sending it off to our guest lunch correspondent in the field, Lester Holt.
Let's see. Here's this week's lunch menu for everyone at Pinecrest. Starting off Monday, it's veggie burger with bun, Fiesta beans, 3/4 cup Fiesta beans, applesauce cup plus milk. For Tuesday, the 21st, the menu includes cheeseburger sliders. Who doesn't love a good cheeseburger slider? Health brand crackers, 3/4 cups of green peas and milk or juice. You're available. And finally, Friday, the 24th, the menu barbecue chicken patty sandwich with a bun, seasoned green beans, apple slices, and milk. Enjoy and have a great week.
Thanks, Lester. That sounds delicious.
I'm Lester Holt, and this is Pinecrest Academy of Nevada News.
A funny side story about that one is that those students were in 8th grade, and that very next year they went to high school and they were applying. One of them was applying to be in a senior level journalism class, and they had to create a resume to get in. And this student said that he collaborated with Lester Holt, and the teacher didn't believe him. And I sent that footage on over, and sure enough, he got into the senior level class. So here's a lesson on what it means to be a comedian, a professional comedian. A number of students will come to me and ask me, can you find me somebody who has been on the Tonight Show? And this gentleman, his name is Brian Regan, very accomplished stand-up comedian, talking to the students about the beginnings of his career.
Regan, this is Callie.
Hi, Callie.
Hi. Oh yeah. Was your family really supportive of you wanting to become a comedian?
I haven't told them yet. Well, it was, yes, they were. I have a lot of comedian friends whose parents were not supportive of what they wanted to do because it's kind of an unusual career choice. And it can be very, you never know if somebody's going to be able to make it or not. And so a lot of parents, they care about their kids, and so they might be worried about this career choice. But I was very fortunate in that my mom and dad respected the fact that this is something I really wanted to do, and they supported me, and I've always appreciated that. I opened in Fort Lauderdale, so I was able to try to perform there. And they had an open mic night or an audition night, and they finally let me be a local comedian, which meant I got to take the trash out. I got to work at the club, cooking burgers in the kitchen and taking the trash out after the show, but they let me go on every night. And so it was a fun experience to be able to just try to figure out how to be a comedian. And what was weird is when the show was over, when I was in the back emptying trash cans in the dumpster, people who were leaving the show said they make comedians take the trash out. And I used to say, not the good comedians, but the ones that are just starting. So that's.
So I like the anecdotes that a lot of these guests have. We had some of the students were asking me sarcastically if we could bring in Siri, and I reached out to Susan Bennett, who is the voice of Siri, and she was more than happy to oblige.
Now, the recordings that I did that ultimately became Siri were done probably before a lot of you were born. 2005 is the first year that I did the recordings that ended up being Siri. Now, these types of recordings are called IVR, interactive voice recognition. And the scripts that you read for these kinds of things are very different from any other script because many times they don't make sense. Let me explain that. All of the phrases and sentences that we had to read were created just for sound. They wanted to get all the sound combinations in the language. And so some of the sentences we had to read made no sense at all because they were created for sound and not meaning or content. So we had to say funny things like, cow hoist in the tub hut today. Fossa ask fussy. Militia oi hallucinate, buckra okra ooze. Say the shrouding again, say the shredding 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 again. It was very, very tedious stuff. Now, after these recordings were done, technicians and computers went into the recordings and extracted sounds. They reformed them into new phrases and sentences, and these are what ended up on all our devices.
As you can imagine, a lot of the students going home and saying that they had a lesson from Siri, there was some hesitancy and doubt from some of the parents, but we sent the video out and they understood it. This gentleman, his name is Martin Cooper. He's one of the inventors of the original cell phone. What's incredible about this video, not just that he's speaking to students around the world about his engineering process, but also that this was one of the very first times he had ever video conferenced before. So that's what you're seeing on this video.
Oh, wow. I just put a different screen on and now I can see everybody. Wow, what an experience this is. Seriously, I have a screen now with 12, 16, 17 pictures on it. I feel like I'm talking to a classroom.
When you made the phone, was there like any pressure from, I don't know, father whom to do it, like for it to work, or did you had like all the time in the world? Like, was there any pressure?
Any pressure?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, was there pressure? Dreaming is very important, Alfonso. If you can't have an imagination of how things could be if you do something, then your future is not nearly as interesting. If you have the imagination and figure out how things could be better, you have reached the essence of what engineering is.
Very poignant lesson. Here's, as you can imagine, we have a lot of history guests that have firsthand account of everything that, everything that they had seen. This gentleman in the background, his name is Clint Hill. He's a Secret Service member for Mrs. Kennedy. And he was talking to the kids about what he experienced that day when President Kennedy was assassinated. And that is him on the back of that Lincoln Cadillac, telling the kids about the sights, the smells, the sounds, everything he recalled from that day. It definitely beats learning about it in a textbook. So I'm just sharing photos of some of these, not just inundating you guys with just video. The possibilities are out of this world. As you can imagine, we've had a number of astronauts connect with our students. The folks over at NASA couldn't be more polite and happy to connect students with their astronauts. Here's some footage of Dr. Michael Barrett speaking to students.
So I'm really glad to be with you guys. And as Mr. Krauss was mentioning, he wanted me to say a little bit about how I got to where I am. And I was fortunate to meet Mr. Krauss at a time where we were celebrating something really big, and that was the Apollo moon landing a long time ago, long before you guys were born, but a really big thing in my life because it was so inspirational as a little guy to watch people walking on the moon. And it was definitely one of the things that kind of pointed me towards this path that I've chosen to get me into space. This is how it was to launch in space on the space shuttle. This was the Space Shuttle Discovery on its last mission. And all that training, all those years, one of the biggest moments that kind of came down to this. So it was really cool to launch on this thing. It's just like somebody shakes your house in a storm and then hurls it into the sky when those engines light. And it takes about 8 minutes and 45 seconds or so to get into orbit. And this next view is from the booster that is going to burn out of fuel and separate. We continue up into orbit. That's our space shuttle and our external tank. And those things would fall into the ocean and be reclaimed. And after, again, about 8 minutes and 45 seconds of shake, rattle, and roll, you were in space. It was pretty cool.
My name is Elliot, and How was space created?
How was space created? I have no idea how space was created, but I really love it, and I'll just have to leave it right there.
My name is Kara, and my question is, like, I think all of us just wonder, like, how is your like everyday life, like working in the NASA, you know, like, and what's like the most important, like the most exciting part of it?
Well, that's a really good question, Farah, because you know what astronauts love to do is fly in space, and I have been an astronaut for 19 years, but only 7 months of that time has been flying in space. However, some of the other things that we get to do involve flying really fast jets, T-38 aircraft. We spend time in a great big water tank practicing spacewalks. And I get to teach some of the new astronauts now how to do that. We spend time doing research. We spend time practicing on payloads and experiments that we're going to fly in space. And then for me, it's a lot of medical work where we're trying to figure out what medical experiments we need to do and what we need to know about the human body to make us safe and healthy to go to Mars and to go to the moon. So I spend a lot of my time doing that.
A lot of training, but as you can see, that the students range from all different ages depending on the guest, of course, and the content. But you know, we've heard of thematic units, but that's a vertically thematic unit because not only does it cross different subjects like engineering and different sciences, but it also crosses different grade levels too, which is really cool to see. Here we have Alfred Shehab. He was a member of the United States Army during World War II, and he's speaking to students in Spain, Italy, and France about the Battle of the Bulge, which he was there, and talking about his experience in answering the students' questions.
Now, when I took over my platoon, I told my platoon sergeant for the first patrol that came up while I was there that I intended to lead that patrol, and the sergeant tried to explain to me that my position was in the middle of the patrol as a platoon commander, and I told him I quite well understood that. But I wanted to get some idea about what it was like to be a scout. And we started off, and I was carrying a submachine gun. I stepped into a fire lane in the woods, and there was a German soldier. We looked at each other. I stopped, and my platoon fanned out. And I noticed that he was raising his rifle. And my finger squeezed the trigger on my submachine gun. I didn't tell it to do that. Training told it. And I killed that first German. And my sergeant came up and we checked his pockets to see if he had any maps or anything. And the thing that has stayed with me throughout the entire, well, all this time, I pulled out a picture of a woman and two little girls. And all I could think of at the time, my God, what have I done? I've killed this woman's husband and the father of these two young girls. What have I done? And it's odd. It's just one of these things. War brings things on like that. Now, this one I've never been able to get rid of. It's there. Unfortunately, as we went on, I was responsible for killing quite a few Germans, as they were responsible for killing quite a few of us also.
Now, that history lesson is definitely going to stay with those students whenever they hear about the Battle of the Bulge. They'll remember what they felt talking to an actual survivor. Here, I just included some photos with these ones, but we did a lesson a while ago. This gentleman right over here, his name is Dr. George Wicks, and he was a member of the Office of Strategic Services, which was formerly which would ultimately become the Central Intelligence Agency. Him and his colleagues were sent to Vietnam at the end of World War II to interview this gentleman, Ho Chi Minh, to figure out America's interests in Southeast Asia. He would ultimately talk about how things escalated. And then he would retire from the OSS and he became an English professor at University of Oregon. So here he is, I believe he was 92 when he was talking to these students about his experience. Now from there, the students got to speak to one of the final soldiers out of Vietnam from 30 years later, Terry Bennington, who was one of the final 11 soldiers rescued out of Saigon. So the kids got to compare and contrast both of those historical viewpoints, which was pretty interesting. Here we have a lot of events with the Pacific Historic Parks or Pearl Harbor, with a lot of their survivors and eyewitnesses talking to the kids every year about what they witnessed. This gentleman, his name is Jimmy Lee. He has since passed away, but here he is talking to the kids live from Hawaii and showing them the different places where he remembered seeing the planes come in and drop bombs, which was very poignant to hear that from a survivor. Here we have one of the Navajo code talkers, Thomas H. Begay. Here he is on Iwo Jima, helping the United States Marine Corps. And here he is speaking to fifth graders and answering their questions about his experience. Again, it's not just a video, it's a live two-way interactive conversation. And this is Ben Lesser. Ben is a survivor of Auschwitz and Buchenwald concentration camps, and he's also the last surviving member of the Dachau death train. Here he is, he's speaking to students in Germany who are learning about the Holocaust.
And my sister Lola marries Michael. And they had the wedding, and this is the wedding parties that was in the yard. This was not allowed. The Nazis did not allow us to gather more than 3 people in one place. Either it's a family, but if it's not a family, more than 3 people couldn't be together. Now, the strange thing is, out of all the people that you see, only 3 of us survived. Michael, Lola, and I. Everyone else was slaughtered. Nobody survived the war. While individuals can't always choose what happens to them, whether it's a crisis or a calamity, people can choose to either let it ruin their lives or to learn from it and move forward. It's essential to understand the consequences of personal choices. It's possible to let tragedy or trauma become a reason to stop living. But it's also possible to live through extreme circumstances and commit to a life that has meaning, a life that matters. I want you to remember that.
And it's weird because throughout the years, I developed friendships with one of these people, and he lives here in Las Vegas, and I feel very confident to call him a very, very close friend. He just turned 93, and I like connecting with a lot of these people. Here's 2 very wonderful people. We have Dr. Ben Carson. I'm sure we're all aware of him, but here he is talking about his career being a neurosurgeon with students across the United States.
Carson, my name is Pierre. I wanted to know what interested you in neurosurgery and what motivated you to go through all the years of medical school?
Well, interestingly enough, let me answer the last part first. When I decided I was going to be a doctor, so many people, so many of my classmates said, but you have to go to college for 4 years and medical school for 4 years and a year of internship and several years of residency. You'll be an old man by the time you finish. But a funny thing happened. When I finished, they were the same age as I was. So, time didn't slow down for them just because they weren't doing that. But, in terms of deciding on neurosurgery, after I decided that I didn't want to be a psychiatrist, I said, what are you really, really good at? because I think God gives everybody special gifts and talents. And I started analyzing my life, and I realized I had a lot of eye-hand coordination. I could think in 3 dimensions. I was a very careful person. I never knocked things over and said, oops, which is a good characteristic for a brain surgeon, by the way. And, you know, I loved all the aspects of the brain. And that's how I decided that I'd be a terrific brain surgeon. And a lot of people thought I was kind of nutty, because at that time, there had only ever been 8 Black neurosurgeons in the world. And so a lot of people said, you're nuts. What are you going to do that for? But, you know, I think you should always follow your talent. You don't worry about what other people have to say.
Great advice, especially nowadays. Here, a recent one. This is one of my favorites. This is Governor Bush speaking to students in France, Italy, Spain, and the United States.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bush. My question is, what advice would you give for students that are going out in the world and discover what they would like to do with their lives?
Well, I kind of gave the advice already, and something I really believe in, which is pursue it. Basically, have a bias towards action rather than, oh my, what am I going to do? How, you know? I mean, I think it's really important. My lesson, the things I've learned in my life was I did things, and then it led to something else, and it led to something else. So I'll give you an example. When I was 24, I was working at a bank in Houston, Texas, and the chairman of the bank called me up. I was his assistant because I knew how to write, which, by the way, is a skill that if you have is a huge advantage, being able to communicate with the written word. So I was his assistant, and he knew my wife was from Mexico, so he assumed I was bilingual, which I kind of was. And he said, I want you to go to Venezuela and open up the office. Now, at the time, Venezuela was like the second most expensive city in the world. It was crazy. It was just huge growth, lots of it's a crazy place. And I had 2 little kids, 16 months and 3 months. And rather than say, oh, I don't know, that's like too much, maybe it's too much for my family, I said, okay, when do we go? And it was an incredible, thanks to my wife's, you know, she had all the hard work taking care of kids in a place that had water like 3 times a day for an hour. I mean, we struggled with it, but it was an incredible learning experience. And so my advice to you is don't think about everything to the point where you're paralyzed. Think about it a little bit, but then act on it, because whatever happens, once you do that, it opens up other doors. If you're thinking about it so much, no doors are open. You're sitting on the sidelines of life. And the pursuit of things in life are what give real meaning to life, not overthinking things.
See, a lot of these, I don't know about you guys, but as an educator, I kind of think back of what I would have felt as a student. And man, I really wish that I had teachers like that giving me advice. Here we have education visionary and charter school pioneer Fern Zulueta speaking to approximately 4,000 students and teachers around the world about his vision for global student collaboration. Now, mind you, this is long before COVID, so this was a really cool one.
The idea behind this is to connect schools and students from around the world, and do so not just in presentations like this, but allow you to do so that going forward, you could be taking a class here in the United States and collaborating with students perhaps in Europe or in Latin America or in Asia, and share your knowledge and really work together in a different kind of social network. Unfortunately, many of you, most of you, or probably all of you, are somehow connected on right now in a social network, right? It's whether it's Facebook, or which I doubt most of you are too young for Facebook, but Instagram or Snapchat or one of these other tools. And as you know, you spend a lot of time with these things. I'm not sure how social they really help make you, and they're not used enough for what could really add value to your lives, right? Now, if on the other hand, you can connect with other students and you have a subject that you're all working on together, you're doing like a group project, but imagine that that group project involves you here, someone else in Italy, someone else in Spain, and someone in Latin America someplace, then imagine how much work you could do, and how cool that would be for not only for them, for those students, for yourselves, and for your ability to communicate and develop a better knowledge of the subjects you're working on together.
It's like ultra collaboration. Here's this was one of my favorite ones. This is Bob Odenkirk. He was a writer for Saturday Night Live, and he's now an actor in Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Here he is speaking to students about his comedy writing career.
My DVR, here's a joke I wrote. My DVR is completely filled up with shows about hoarders. You get it? I know I should erase some, but I have other jokes too. Let me go to my little joke file. But go ahead, ask me a question.
What's your favorite thing to do apart from like acting and talking to us?
I really do like comedy writing. I like laughing with my friends. It's one of the greatest things is when I finally was able to make a living as a comedy writer, just to know that all I have to do today is write some funny stuff. That's my job. My job is to be silly. That's like crazy to get that job, right? That's like the best thing in the world. My daughter asked me what was the most fun I ever had in my whole life. And I wrote a sketch for my friend Chris Farley at Second City. You kids may or may not know it. He played a motivational speaker who was yelling at a bunch of kids in a family room. And that was just doing that with my friends on stage every night was the greatest thing ever. But I like sitting around with a bunch of funny people and making each other laugh. It's a great job to have if you can swindle the world into paying you for that. You could be.
We're a little strapped for time. So from this, I was able to reach out to Bryan Cranston, who's an actor, but instead of him streaming it to us, he came to one of our campuses and we had it streamed out to the other kids.
What made you want to become an actor, and when, was it your first career choice?
Actually, my first career choice as I wanted to be an astronaut and a baseball player when I was really young. How many of we're all thinking that, right? We've all had those things of, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to design dresses, I want to do this, I want to, whatever it is for you. And I'm so glad you asked this question because this is something I want to say too. So I should do that. So I went to college studying police science. My second year in college, I take an acting class. My first day of acting class, the teacher, we're all nervous. I'm 19 years old. It was just as an elective, just to have fun. And the teacher is handing out pieces of paper. Here, you do this, you do this, you do this. You two read this. And wherever you happen to be standing next to, and I was nervous. And I looked at the page, and the page said, "A couple is making out on a park bench." Right. That's exactly what I felt. I got so nervous, and I looked over and I saw, and she was a really cute girl, but she had not yet looked at this yet. And I'm starting to sweat because, oh my gosh, I have to kiss this girl. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I have to kiss this girl. And I wanted to because she was really cute, but did she want to? I was kind of nervous about that. And I was waiting and wondering if she was going to look over, and when she was talking to a friend, and then she looked at it and said, and of course she looked up to find out who she's going to have to kiss. And she looked over, and I thought, oh, I should strike a posture, something cool, something to look better, like those birds in the wild on National Geographic try to make themselves look prettier. The plumage goes out, and like, look at how colorful I am. And she looked over and did this. She looked over to see who she was going to have to kiss. and she did this. I took that as a victory. Indifference was a victory to me. Oh my goodness. Now I'm thinking, I just had this experience where I was kissing this girl, and now I realize she was acting. That's the answer to your question. I felt the power. I was absolutely convinced that she liked me, and she didn't. She was acting.
She was acting. Just a really cool personal anecdote, and those kids are never going to forget that for the rest of their lives. And it doesn't always pan out, obviously, to where it's in person, but again, that two-way exchange over video conference, man, there's just nothing like it as an educator. Here we have this gentleman. His name is Vince Papali. He was a high school teacher, and he decided to try out on a whim for the Philadelphia Eagles. He subsequently made the team, and they made a movie called Invincible about his story. Here he is speaking to athletes, student athletes from across the country.
What are you most proud of? What am I most proud of? Well, I'm most proud of my children. How's that? You know, making the Philadelphia Eagles, you know, I don't know, maybe that'd be maybe 6th or 7th. The most proud would be getting that college scholarship and getting my college education. What do you play, man? I know you play sports. What do you do? I play football. There you go. What position? Tell me let's say you look like a fullback and a linebacker. There you go. Yeah, baby. I tell you, I'm gonna be your agent. Look at you, man. I can just tell already you're going somewhere. I know it. I'm gonna be reading about you someday.
You're going somewhere, and you better believe that student had a smile on his face the rest of the day. Here we have multiple history classes learning about September 11th. We had the mantra, 20 years ago, we'll never forget, but some of these individuals, it had been years since anyone had asked them their story of survival. What Amanda Ripley was talking about in the keynote at the beginning of today, talking about persevering through adversity, I couldn't agree more. So here we have multiple survivors from both the Trade Center and the Pentagon every year sharing with their students. Here is Dan Holdridge from the Pentagon talking to students in Miami. We have William Raff from Tower 2 talking to students in Las Vegas. Here's Brian Bronco he's a survivor from Tower 2 talking to students in both Nevada and Florida. And here we have Artie Van White. He is a survivor from the promenade of the Trade Center talking to students in Iqaluit, Canada. So here is, a lot of it has to do with persevering through adversity and through unimaginable trauma. One of the last videos I'm going to show you is from a gentleman who survived from inside.
All right, so my name is Stanley Prentice, and I am married, 2 children. One is married, Stephanie, and the younger one just finished college. Both of them are working. So I'm one of these average, ordinary dads. All right, so 9/11, most of us remember where we are, exactly what we were doing. And I remember that as if it was yesterday, even though it's coming up to 18 years since that infamous day. Took the local elevator to the 81st floor where I work on the south side of the second building. We used to call it World Trade Center 2. I walk all the way down the corridor to the south side of the building, make a right, and there's a huge glass paled office. So I walked towards my desk, the phone rang, my mother was in the phone stand. How you doing? I'm fine, thank you. My brothers, Paul, Steve, and Bill, they took turns in asking me the same questions, and nobody told me that the first building was hit. And I'm saying to myself, God, there's a lot of love here. It's not even 8:30 and they're calling me. Not realizing they're watching TV at home and they're seeing that the first building is hit. See, I was in the elevator going up when the first plane hit the first building, and because the building is soundproof, I didn't hear anything. I said, we got to get out of here. We stood there, the elevator door opened up, we just stepped in. Not a word is said. We hit the ground floor, the doors open up, and there's a turnstile, and I stepped out, and the security guard says, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. I saw 5 balls coming down from the first building. And he said, no, your building is safe, secure, go back to your office. I stepped back in that elevator. The door closes. while the door closed. And I still remember him looking at this Japanese fella, Kawauchi, and he had his sweater tucked in his khaki. He says, "Come on, man, it's a warm, nice day." And there's a chuckle. And I still remember the smile. Alicia Levin is smiling. "Come on, Stan. It's got to be Stan," and all these nice comments. Not realizing that I would never see these folks again. Made a turn and I walked in there in the right, man, the phone is ringing again, and a young lady from Chicago is calling me. "Stan, get out." "Get out for what?" "Stan, you're not logged on to the computer. You're not watching the monitor. Get out, Stan." "Stan, we don't have the time." "No, I'm a logical-minded person. You tell me and I will go." "Stan, please, we don't have the time." And she is crying, begging, "Get out." And while assuring her that, "Look, unless you tell me what is happening, I'm not going to go," I just happened to raise my head, and what I saw first was a little tiny dot of a gray plane coming towards me, and within the seconds it's getting larger and larger and larger. And I can hear that sound, that thunderous sound that it's making as it's coming towards me. And when it got like close as 1,000 feet, I just dropped the phone and I screamed, and I don't know why I said what I will tell you that I say, or what I said. I said, "Lord, I can't do this, you take over." And that's all I remember. I dove under that desk. And the last minute, the plane made a tilt, and the bottom wing took out the 79th floor to the 82nd floor, the 4 floors that we occupied. And upon impact, a large chunk of the plane was stuck in the office doorway. The ceiling caved in, the floor dropped, is hovering over me. It looks like somebody took a giant bag of cement and threw it in the air. And there's flames all around, and what you didn't see on TV as the windows pop, the air pressure was so great it was sucking everything out. And the only desk that stood firm was the one that I'm hiding under. My Bible was on top of that desk. At the split second that I made that scream, and I cried out to God, somebody at the other end of the floor heard and had a flashlight shining it over them, all around, over the head. As I'm screaming, the person is responding, but I couldn't hear. I got temporarily deaf. "Please wait for me." And I start to crawl. I crawled the entire length of 1 floor, which was like 1 acre square. A little fainter, and the person behind the wall is saying, "If you want to live, climb over that wall." It had a hollow ceiling. Bang on the wall and know exactly where you are. I hit the wall. The man said, "I can hear you, no, climb over." I can't climb over. He said, "You got to do it. You got to think about your family or you're going to die." I tried the first time, tried to jump and hang on to the wall. There's a dry wall, 10 feet sheetrock wall. Couldn't do it. I remember I folded a fist as tightly as I could. Look at that wall, and I punched with all my strength. And my fist went straight through that wall. I said, "When you see my head yank my body through, I poked my head through." The man gave me a headlock, and he pulled such force, and I squirmed, and I flew off on the other side and knocked him off his feet. We rolled down 10 flights of stairs, and we landed on the 80th floor. He stretched his hand, and he says, "Brian Clark." And I said, "Stanley Premneth." And this guy said, "All my life I live as an only child. I was born and raised in Canada. I always wanted a brother, and today I find that person." And this good old Irish man put his hand around my shoulder and says, "Come on, buddy, let's go home."
Amazing about this is that we're able to create thematic units from it. Not only do the kids learn about the attacks of September 11th, they also learn about America's response. This gentleman, his name is Bart Decker, and he was one of the horse soldiers who answered that call in October of 2001 when they invaded Afghanistan by way of Uzbekistan. He speaks to our students every year about the sacrifices that him and his brothers and sisters made in the military so many years ago. So we keep these stories alive. From here, we also have been fortunate to learn about President Bush's administration's response from former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, who's been kind enough to speak to our students. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time for all of these videos, so I'm just sharing you some of these photos. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to message them in the chat. I'll go ahead and just end it with a this was a news clip about a year and a half before COVID that the local news here in Las Vegas did on edutainment.
Well, new at 6, technology is now changing the way our kids learn. Nevada charter school Pinecrest Academy St. Rose is using something called edutainment learning, using video conferences as part of the learning process.
And tonight in our Raising the Bar series on education, I show you how the kids are learning from those they may never have the chance to meet in person.
The battery would last 20 minutes.
This is Martin Cooper, one of the original inventors of the mobile phone.
To think about something in a way that nobody else has thought about before, and I thought about it. And each of you can do that.
Inspiring students at Pinecrest Academy of Nevada, St. Rose, with this message.
You have the ability to do something nobody else has ever done before. I cannot express to you how satisfying that is.
What's especially exciting for these students is they get to interact and meet some extraordinary people through edutainment learning, a nonprofit initiative to connect students with primary sources of information through video conferencing.
I found that bringing in guest speakers, whether it be physically or through video conferencing technology, makes the lessons so much more impactful and helps supplement the instruction that's going on in our classrooms.
And students have heard from dozens of guests on the front lines of history. Krauss says it's impactful.
And we had Mrs. Kennedy's Secret Service, Clint Hill, was the very first video conference guest that we ever had, speaking about what he experienced the day President Kennedy was assassinated.
No matter the subject, from Vietnam veterans, astronauts, Holocaust and D-Day and 9/11 survivors, students like 6th grader Isabella say hearing the actual account from a 9/11 survivor was moving.
Our speaker actually went into detail of exactly like how her day went, and it was just very memorable for me to see things in a different way than just watching it on the news.
Even local celebrities like Rick Harrison from Pawn Stars has appeared for a history lesson.
I just think it's really important we know what it means to be an American citizen. The people who really sacrificed before us to give us what we have today.
Ralph Krauss believes what we have with edutainment learning is endless. 7 billion people on the planet and plenty of stories to share.
I really, truly believe that this is the way of the future as far as education goes in our country.
And Krauss says they have had speakers from all over the world speak to the students right here in Nevada. He says 5 minutes of someone's time sharing their story can change a student's life forever.
Yeah. So again, before we wrap up, all of my educators out there, if you could connect your students with anyone living, who would it be? And how would you tie it into instruction? And what's stopping you from reaching out? I'm going to just leave my contact information up here if you have any questions about how we do edutainment at Academica Virtual Education and Academica and Pinecrest, Nevada. Feel free to reach out, and we're always looking for collaborations and stuff too. So if anyone has any questions, you can message them in the chat. But thank you everyone for coming. I really sincerely appreciate it. Oh, we got okay. I hope everyone has a good day, and just please don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful EdPalooza. Please don't forget that we also have Fern Zuleta speaking on Thursday, December 3rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is it's going to be a fun one. So thank you all for joining, and I really appreciate your time.